Despite the fact that it's legally committed to eventually adopting the euro, Sweden has long resisted joining the eurozone. Like a handful of other EU states, namely Denmark, Czechia, Hungary, Poland, and Romania, Sweden has instead decided to keep its own national currency, the Swedish krona, and its own central bank, the Riksbank. However, recent volatility in the krona has meant a growing number of economists and policy analysts are arguing that Sweden should at least revisit the idea of adopting the euro. And last week, the finance minister of the incumbent centre-right government announced plans to set up an expert panel to weigh the pros and cons of joining the single currency. So in this video, we'll take a look at why Sweden has thus far avoided adopting the euro, why that stance may now be changing, and how likely it is that Sweden could become the Eurozone's 22nd member. If you love staying informed and want some of the best reporting on YouTube, then subscribe and ring the bell for more. Let's start by looking at why Sweden hasn't been too keen on joining the Eurozone up until now. Since the euro was introduced in 1999, member states of the EU have been formally expected to adopt the euro once they meet the requirement conditions. However, not everyone has done so. For instance, the UK and Denmark, both of which joined the European bloc over 20 years prior to the Eurozone's creation, negotiated an opt-out clause for joining. For Sweden, which joined the EU in 1995, joining the euro also proved highly controversial. Opponents countered that there were few tangible benefits to giving up the krona. First, after recovering strongly from the 1990s financial crisis, Sweden's export-oriented economy was performing well, and there were concerns that joining the euro might effectively strengthen Sweden's exchange rate, and thus make its exports less competitive internationally. Second, it's probably fair to say that Swedes were more hesitant than other Europeans about surrendering their monetary sovereignty to the European Central Bank, a relatively untested entity compared to the Riksbank, which is quite literally the world's oldest central bank and has a pretty good record. More generally, the Eurozone itself was at the time still viewed as a new and untested project, which raised concerns about its long-term viability. However, supporters of the euro, mainly business leaders, some economists, and most mainstream political parties, argue that euro membership would strengthen Sweden's influence within the EU, reduce transaction costs for exporters, and attract foreign investment. The governing centre-left Social Democratic Party were divided, but the Prime Minister at the time, who was pro-euro adoption, warned that remaining outside the euro risked marginalising Sweden in EU decision-making. To resolve the issue, in 2003, Sweden held a national, non-binding referendum on whether to join the Eurozone. The result was a clear rejection. 56% voted against adopting the euro, while 42% voted in favour. Support for the euro was concentrated mainly in Stockholm and the county of Scania in the southwest, whereas the rest of the country, apart from a few municipalities along the northwestern border with Finland, voted overwhelmingly against adoption. In the years that followed, public support for joining the euro remained low, as Sweden's economy continued to grow strongly. Sweden's GDP growth outpaced that of the euro area, while major eurozone economies such as Germany, France, and Italy struggled with weak growth and rising debt after the financial crisis. In 2012, amid the eurozone debt crisis, support for euro adoption in Sweden fell to an all-time low. The public consensus was that as long as it kept its fiscal house in order, there was no reason to join the Eurozone, and neither Brussels nor Stockholm pressed the issue. Although we should say that the euro was used informally in some of the border regions. In towns such as Haparanda, for instance, near the Finnish town of Tornio, many shops accept euros, and some workers even paid in euros. Anyway, after 2 decades out of the political spotlight, the topic of ditching the krona has returned to the political forefront. Last week, Sweden's finance minister said that she'd launch an inquiry into euro adoption if her moderate party remains in power following September's general election, reflecting a shift in opinion among economists. Some who opposed the euro in 2003 now argue that the case for joining has strengthened, and Eurobarometer polling suggests that public opinion has slightly warmed on the idea too. The main reason that support for euro adoption has grown seems to be that Sweden's economy has been struggling in recent years. GDP fell sharply at the end of 2022, and the country entered a recession in 2023, contracting by 0.2%. While many European economies face headwinds during this period, Sweden's performance was weaker than the EU average, which recorded modest growth of around 0.2%. A key driver to Sweden's downturn was high inflation, which peaked at roughly 12% in December 2022, well above the European average, and eroded household purchasing power. At the same time, the krona weakened significantly. During the 2003 referendum, it traded at 9 krona per euro. In recent years, though, it's fallen to just under 12 per euro, representing a depreciation of roughly 25%. In early 2025, the krona was trading at near historic lows against the euro, which left regular Swedes with weaker purchasing power and put upwards pressure on inflation. Since then, the krona has recovered somewhat, rising more than 5% against the euro and nearly 20% against the dollar, its strongest gain in over 2 decades, although this mostly reflects the dollar's weakness rather than the krona's strength. While on paper this is great news for ordinary Swedes, the sharp swings in the currency have unsettled economists and politicians, and sparked anxious chatter about the prospect of some severe geopolitical shock, such as a military escalation in the Baltic region, which could trigger a rapid depreciation in the krona. As such, some argue that integration into the Eurozone could offer greater stability and reduce Sweden's exposure to currency volatility. Nonetheless, Sweden remains a way off actually joining the Eurozone. For starters, under current EU rules, Sweden would still need to spend at least 2 years in the exchange rate mechanism, a system designed to stabilize a country's currency against the euro by keeping exchange rates within a defined range. Moreover, though, it would probably require another referendum, and polls suggest that most Swedes would still prefer to keep the krona as things stand. Even if public opinion were to shift, most of Sweden's major political parties remain reluctant. Of the 3 parties governing in the minority government, only the Liberals are firmly in favour of euro adoption, and they could lose seats in this year's election. Meanwhile, the main opposition and largest party in parliament, the centre-left Social Democratic Party, continues to oppose adoption, arguing that the issue was already settled by the 2003 referendum. Still, more than 2 decades have passed, and many Swedes may now feel that it's time to have their say once again. But whether the country ultimately moves towards another referendum will depend largely on the outcome of the September general election and the priorities of the next government. Now, this is a big story, and amongst every other big story happening right now, you might be feeling powerless in the current climate. The problems feel massive, and individual actions can feel meaningless. But what if we told you that you can be part of something bigger, something that actually turns concern into action? Well, that's where our friends at Planet Wild come in. Planet Wild is not just your usual environmental organisation. It's a passionate community built around a clear focus, protecting and conserving the world we all live in. We're more aware than ever that the world is a scary place, and the state of our planet needs to change. So every single month, the Planet Wild community funds a mission to protect endangered animals, restore our forests, and clean our oceans. They document all of these missions in videos here on YouTube, so we can see exactly what we've helped to achieve. The impact we've all made will be right before our eyes. From cleaning up Mumbai's plastic river, to protecting Europe's last ancient forest, and even saving elephants with the help of bees. Planet Wild will stop at nothing to make the world a better place for every living being on it. So where do you and I come in? Well, by becoming a member, we're directly funding a brand new nature mission from the comfort of our own home. We support, they execute. If you want to join the growing community making a real difference, Planet Wild is the place to be. Big or small, your difference matters, and you can contribute as little as $6 a month to help protect nature. We're big fans of Planet Wild, so much so that the first 100 people to use code NEWSEU2 will get their first month paid for by us. Just scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description. By joining today, you'll immediately be making a difference and even be able to see your impact in less than 30 days on YouTube right here. You can cancel your membership at any time, so there's absolutely no catch. Just an easy and remarkable way to create real and lasting change. And if you want to see them in action, check out their mission cleaning up Mumbai's river plastic.